Good evening, dear doctors. 100 years of this miraculous discovery of insulin has been a lifesaver for millions and a life giver to an equal number. Every time one hears the story of Banting, Best, McLeod, and Collip collaborating, brainstorming, nerve wrackingly taking risks, and even indulging in scientific arguments, it gives one goosebumps to imagine what they must have gone through to give this gift of life. These are inspiring stories with enough enamor for us all who have been extremely lucky and fortunate to have been born in the era that already has this beautiful discovery and gift. We are also at an interesting juncture of insulin evolution where we are experiencing the magic and powers of modern medicine that has further transformed this protein into so many little wonders to help our people with diabetes. We have experts, stalwarts actually, who are living legends and have closely seen this journey of insulin and are rightfully here to share their expertise, experience, and anecdotes with us in this commemoration by RSSDI of the 100 years since insulin discovery. Without further ado, may I hand over the stage to Dr. Banshi Sabu, our president, our visionary leader, who has arranged for this wonderful session for us all. Dr. Banshi?
Thank you, Purvi. First of all, thanks for inviting me. This is a program which is initiated by RSSDI and which is led by the RSSDI social media team. We have social media team member Dr. Purvi Chawla and Dr. Amit who are very, very active. And how we are doing every week one program on social media. This RSSDI social media live on Facebook. We have thousands of RSSDA members, doctors, as well as lay persons who are following us regularly. This video is also seen by hundreds of the time by multiple people. So already Purvi had introduced what we are going to talk about it because we are celebrating centenary year of 100 years of insulin discovery, and we have with us legends who are with us. So to introduce Professor Vinod Kumar, because today is very, very interesting session. We have three patrons with us. We have RSSDA three patrons, and to moderate that session, we have most wonderful persons from our country, Dr. Sanjay Kalra, who is not only very active member of RSSDA, he was past RSSDA executive committee member, and he was past Endocrine Society India president, also immediate past president of RSSDA. To introduce, we have Dr. Vinod Kumar, who is a founder secretary of RSSDA. Just before we were talking that in 1972, when RSSDA was formed, he was the founder secretary of RSSDA. He is former professor of medicine in All India Institute of Medical Science at New Delhi. He was also in PGI Chandigarh as a head of department in endocrinology department. He has published more than 200 papers with 3 books, and multiple things are there. But currently, he is a very active member, and he is a patron of RSSDI, which is one of the largest society of professionals in India, having more than 8,000 members in our country. Now, to introduce our next expert, he is Professor B Chandalia. I mean, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Chandalia, sir. He is a consultant endocrinologist and diabetologist based in Mumbai, who is a director of Department of Endocrinology Diabetes at Jaslok Hospital, and he is having a institute called Denmark, which is Diabetes Endocrine Nutrition Management and Research Center. He was faculty of a Grant Medical College and also at US also from 1967 to 1970, have multiple publications. He was editor of our textbook of last third edition in 2015. He was editor of our International Journal of Diabetes in Developing Countries of RSSDI from 1991 to 2012, and he is editor currently of Diabetes Today since 1991. He is also patron of our RSSDI Society, and we all know Dr. H.B. Chandalia from Mumbai. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation on this social media. And I welcome you. I welcome Dr. Vinod Kumar, sir, also. And then we have dynamic personality Professor Dr. Ashok Das. He's always there with us. He's also currently RSSDI patron, who was past president of all societies, which are like whether you talk of physicians, he was dean of ICP and all other society, but he is a endocrinologist and he is a past dean of JIPMER Pondicherry. He is a former professor and head of Department of Endocrinology of a PIMS Institute, and his educational qualification, other than doing his MD, PhD, he have multiple fellowship. He is training in India as well as training outside the country. He have multiple publication, more than 130 publication, and currently he is are patron of RSSDI. So we have three patrons of our RSSDI who had seen the RSSDI from 1972 to 2021, and at the same time they have vast experience of their clinical practice of last 50 and 60 years. So they will be the one who will be talking about the insulin. And to moderate that session, we have Dr. Sanjay Kalra, who will be talking that how the insulin was discovered, and rather he will be talking before that also. And in last 100 years in India, how we started using the insulin, and now we are using the modern insulin with insulin pumps and so on. So I think now all stage is yours, Dr. Sanjay Kalra. We start with the discussion, and we would like to have that if we can discuss simultaneously in both the language, English and Hindi, because many of our followers who are regularly following us on this RSSDA social media team. Once again, thank you, thank you. I welcome you all.
Thank you, Dr. Banshi, for this opportunity, this platform. Thank you, Dr. Purvi and Dr. Amit. हिंदी में कहा जाता है, अगर आप सोने की तरह अपने आप को बनाना चाहते हैं, तो आप सराफ के पास जाएं. And this is a great honor for me today to be amongst the goldsmiths of Indian diabetology. Dr. Vinod sir, Dr. Chandalia sir, Dr. Das sir, namaskar, warm greetings with lot of respect. We are always grateful for what you have done for India, for the subject of diabetes care for medicine. Now, this is 2021. 2021 है. 100 years ago was 1921. 1921 एक बहुत खास साल था. 1921 में एक बहुत famous poet पैदा हुए. Sahir Ludhianvi. He was from Ludhiana, where I happened to do my MBBS from. Sahir Ludhianvi ने कहा, मैं पल दो पल का शायर हूँ. पल दो पल मेरी कहानी है. So humble, so unassuming. But even 41 years after his death, we still remember his songs, we remember his lyrics. So he was certainly not a pal do pal ka shayar. He certainly did not have a pal do pal ki kahani. He is still immortal with us. Across the subcontinent, in West Bengal, another filmmaker was born in 1921, and that was Satyajit Ray. His movies, his lyrics, his songs, they also live with us today. So 1921 was important. बहुत खास साल था, बहुत अहम साल था. Across the oceans, across the Atlantic, in USA, a small girl was born, a beautiful girl. Her name was Rosalind Yallow. 1921, the mother of endocrinology. Rosalind Yallow जब बड़ी हुई, उन्होंने create किया radio immunoassay. She taught us how to measure insulin. उससे पहले insulin कैसे measure किया जाता था? By bioassay. You had to take a rabbit, you had to take a rat, you had to inject, you had to check sugars in them. You had to inject insulin, see how much glucose level came down, what sugar level came down, and then you could measure insulin. So 1921, like we said, एक बहुत खास, एक बहुत अहम साल था. USA is a big country, so is India. But then there was a country which is big in size, but very small in terms of population, and that was Canada. Darwin has taught us many things. There is a Darwin's theory of evolution, but there is a Darwin's paradox as well. Darwin ने क्या कहा? What is Darwin's paradox? He said that a wide diversity of flora and fauna is found in a small area, in a small geographical area, like a coral reef. So it is possible that you have lots and lots of people, but there is no diversity in terms of thought. And it is possible that you have a small area, a concentrated area, where you have lots and lots of ideas. Such a place happened to be Toronto in Canada. And this brings us to today's program. Dr. Vinod Kumar sir, आपने 50 साल पहले RSSDI start की. You were the founder president in 1972. Next year we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of RSSDI. But 1921 में टोरंटो में क्या हुआ? What is it that we still remember Toronto for 100 years later?
देखिए 1921 बहुत बड़ा साल था. The discovery of insulin, which gave a lease of life to millions of diabetics who were otherwise destined to die. So this discovery of insulin gave life to a good segment of mankind. That is what happened. This discovery was not only sudden, dramatic, but an astounding success of medical research. इसमें एक खास बात जो मैं बताना चाहूँगा वो ये है कि डॉक्टर बेंटिंग जो इन चारों लोगों में से मेरे हिसाब से वो सबसे ज़्यादा प्रोमिनेंट हुए. हालांकि डिस्कवरी के सहायक 4 लोग थे, बट डॉक्टर बेंटिंग इन स्ट्रिक्टेस्ट टर्म्स was not a researcher to the core. Instead, he was a person who had a very firm determination to cure diabetes, and he kept on reading medicine and physiology, although he was an orthopedic surgeon. He had a very strong laser-like focus to find out the cure of diabetes, and this grit and self-determination led him to the discovery of insulin. This is very much unlike the other medical discoveries which have taken the medical researchers of a long lifetime to slowly unravel the mysteries of physiology and medicine. In contrast, the discovery of insulin was sudden, although it was built on hundreds and hundreds of scientists who had been working in earlier years, in the earlier centuries. I would therefore like to say that this discovery was an astounding discovery, and I can imagine drawing a parallel of this discovery with some events like the entrance of a human into the space like Yuri Gagarin did, or putting a foot on the surface of the moon by Neil Armstrong in 1969, or little more slowly a breakthrough like eradication of smallpox and polio by vaccination. So this is a kind of this, and therefore with such a discovery the whole world came descending down to kneel before Benting and giving accolades, recognitions, honorary causa, so many degrees, and even today a battleship in USA is named after him, a crater on the moon is named after him. He has a Benting house which is a pilgrimage of medical community. He also has a grave where he died in a plane crash, which is also a visit for pilgrimage site. And most importantly for diabetologists, the 14th of November, the World Diabetes Day, is based on Dr. Benting's birthday. So in my view, this was the most exciting part. There are many other things and exciting portions one can talk about, but this is the crux that I wanted to express. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Chandalia, sir, Dr. Vinod Kumar ne bataya that 1921 was an important year, and he says that insulin should be, the discovery of insulin should be marked as one of the major paradigm shifts, not only in medicine, not only in diabetes. Sir is saying in the history of humankind. Now, Dr. Chandalia, sir, you've spent nearly 5 decades looking after patients, looking after people living with diabetes, looking after their caregivers and family members, supporting them as well. What changes have occurred? 50 years ago, what kind of morbidity did people with diabetes present with? What was the mortality pattern? And then how was insulin able to change that?
हाँ, तो मैं इसको पर्सपेक्टिव में डालने के लिए कहूँगा कि मैंने इंसुलिन यूज़ करना शुरू किया 1962 में, जब मैं मेडिकल ग्रेजुएट हुआ, और बाद में एमडी, और बाद में मैं अमेरिका में डायबिटीज़ और एंडोक्राइन रिसर्च के लिए 4 साल गया। तो मुझे उस समय से लेकर आज तक जो इंसुलिन के डेवलपमेंट हुए हैं उसका फर्स्ट हैंड आइडिया है, क्योंकि मैंने इंसुलिन को उस वक्त यूज़ किया है, उसमें जो तकलीफ है वो देखी है, उसमें जो प्रोग्रेस हुई है वो देखी है। तो मैं आपको थोड़ा इससे ये स्टोरी सुनाऊंगा कि शुरुआत में इंसुलिन जब बना, बेंटिंग एंड बेस्ट ने बनाया, तो काफ़ी इम्प्योर था। तो जब पहली उसका इंजेक्शन दिया गया एक यंग डायबिटिक को जिसका नाम लियोनार्ड थॉमसन था, तो उसको काफ़ी स्किन रिएक्शन वगैरह हुआ। तो फिर उन्होंने ऑफकोर्स एक केमिस्ट, बायोकेमिस्ट को साथ में लिया, उसको प्योरीफाई किया, वो था जॉन कॉलिप, और उस प्योरीफिकेशन के बाद थोड़ा टॉलरेबल हो गया इंसुलिन का एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, बट फिर भी काफ़ी मुश्किलें चालू रही। ये भी जानना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि उस वक्त करीब 25 से 30 साल लगे थोड़ी अच्छी प्रोग्रेस होने में। सबसे अच्छी बात तो ये हो गई कि इमीडिएटली उसका जो थोड़ा झगड़ा भी डंडा टंटा हुआ कि उसका पेटेंट होना चाहिए, उसकी कॉस्ट क्या होनी चाहिए, पेटेंट किसको देना चाहिए, और वो पेटेंट दिया गया। एक डॉलर में वो पेटेंट दे दिया गया यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ टोरंटो, और यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ टोरंटो ने जो लिली कंपनी है उसको एनरोल किया इसको बनाने के लिए। तो इसका प्योरीफिकेशन प्रोसेस पहले बहुत धीरे धीरे चला, क्योंकि साइंस में जब आप देखेंगे, पीछे देखेंगे, तो प्रोग्रेस बहुत स्लो होती थी। जैसे हम आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, प्रोग्रेस इतनी फास्ट हो रही है, जैसे आप जो प्रोग्रेस की जो गति अभी आप देखेंगे तो बहुत ही फास्ट हो गई है। तो उस वक्त उसको प्योरीफाई करने में काफ़ी वक्त लगा, और उस वक्त वो एनिमल पेनक्रियाज से एक्सट्रैक्ट किया जाता था। जब मैंने प्रैक्टिस शुरू की 1962 में, इंसुलिन यूज़ करना शुरू किया, उस वक्त जो इंसुलिन इंडिया में मिलता था वो था बोवाइन पोर्साइन मिक्सचर था। कई कई कंट्रीज में पोर्साइन इंसुलिन अलग बनता था, इंडिया में क्या कारण था मुझे मालूम नहीं, मगर बोवाइन पोर्साइन पेनक्रियाज मिलाकर जो इंसुलिन दिया जाता था तो वो जरूर काम करता था, मगर उसमें यह था कि 2 एनिमल सोर्स होने से एलर्जी का चांस बढ़ जाता था। उस इंसुलिन में इम्प्योरिटीज थी, वो करीब 10% इम्प्योरिटीज। उस वायल में आप यदि कितना मिलीग्राम है आप देखें तो उसमें से 10% इम्प्योरिटी थी, जो कि बहुत बड़ा तादाद है इम्प्योरिटीज का। फिर भी उसने लाखों करोड़ों जानें बचाई, और खास करके टाइप 1 डायबिटिक लोगों की जानें बचाई। तो इसलिए वो भी बहुत बड़ा प्रोग्रेस था उस वक्त, मगर उसका प्योरीफिकेशन बहुत ज़रूरी था। सो उसका प्योरीफिकेशन हुआ, फिर प्रोलॉन्गेशन उसका एक्शन हुआ, क्योंकि जो इंसुलिन हम यूज़ कर रहे थे पहले वो रेगुलर इंसुलिन था, तो हर 3-4 घंटा काम करता था। तो उनको लगा कि क्यों नहीं इसके बार बार इंजेक्शन दूसरों का देना काफ़ी पेनफुल था। आजकल तो इंजेक्शन आप 4 दो 5 दो, पेशेंट इतनी बारीक सुइयों से लेते हैं, पेन से लेते हैं, कि वो उसको एक्सेप्ट कर लेते हैं कि मैं 4 इंजेक्शन लूँगा। जैसे हम बेजल बोलस रेजिमेंट में 4 इंजेक्शन दिन में देते हैं, पर उस वक्त मल्टीपल इंजेक्शन बड़ा पेनफुल था, क्योंकि सुइयाँ वगैरह बड़ी क्रूड थी, सिरिंजेस थी, कोई डिस्पोजेबल था नहीं, बॉयल करके यूज़ किया जाता था। और काफ़ी सालों तक मैंने पेशेंट लोगों को कैसे सिरिंज बॉयल करना, कैसे उसको इंसुलिन उसमें से खींचना, और सुइयों की साइज होती थी करीब 1/2 इंच साइज होती थी, और अब है 4 मिलीमीटर। तो ये सब हमने देखा, और इसलिए उसको इंजेक्शन की फ्रीक्वेंसी कम करने के लिए उसका एक्शन प्रोलॉन्गेशन किया। तो एक्शन प्रोलॉन्गेशन हुआ करीब 1950 में, जबकि एनपीएच इंसुलिन आया, जो हेगेडॉन करके साइंटिस्ट ने उसी डेनमार्क से किया, कि उसका एनपीएच इंसुलिन आया। फिर दूसरे साइंटिस्ट थे हालस मोलर, उन्होंने लेंटे इंसुलिन बताया। तो जब मैंने प्रैक्टिस शुरू की तो रेगुलर इंसुलिन था, एनपीएच इंसुलिन था, और लेंटे इंसुलिन था। इनों में तकलीफ क्या थी कि एक तो ये एनिमल सोर्स से एलर्जी होती थी, काफ़ी स्किन रिएक्शन होती थी। लाइपो हाइपरट्रोफी तो इंसुलिन से होती है, अभी भी होती है, यदि पेशेंट एक ही जगह इंसुलिन लगाता रहे तो अभी भी हम बताते हैं कि अलग अलग जगह लगाओ। मगर लाइपो एट्रोफी अब नई इंसुलिन से नहीं देखी जाती, जहाँ की इम्प्योरिटीज नहीं है। तो लाइपो एट्रोफी भी हम देखते थे जिसमें बड़े बड़े खड्डे पड़ जाते थे, जहाँ पेशेंट इंसुलिन लगाता था, और कभी कभी स्किन रिएक्शन होती थी, रैशेज होती थी। तो इस तरह से ये प्रोलॉन्ग एक्शन इंसुलिन थोड़ा आए, और ऐसा लगा कि ये भी एक तरह का प्रोग्रेस था, जो आज हम वापस जा रहे हैं एक दूसरी तरफ, जहां हम चाहते हैं कि छोटे छोटे डोज 4 या 5 दफा इंसुलिन का लगाया जाए, तो हम वापस उस तरफ जा रहे हैं। पर आजकल वो पॉसिबल है, क्योंकि जैसा मैंने बताया सिरिंजेस वगैरह बहुत अच्छी हो गई। तो इस तरह से प्रोग्रेस हुआ। उसके बाद में क्या हुआ कि 1980 में रिकॉम्बिनेंट डीएनए टेक्नोलॉजी आई, उसमें रिकॉम्बिनेंट डीएनए टेक्नोलॉजी में ह्यूमन इंसुलिन बनाना पॉसिबल हुआ। उसमें जो डीएनए का सीक्वेंस किया है गिलबर्ट ने, तो उनको उसका नोबेल पुरस्कार मिला। उसके पहले इंसुलिन के लिए 4 नोबेल प्राइज ऑलरेडी हो गए थे। एक नोबेल प्राइज तो बेंटिंग बेस्ट को, जो कि उन्होंने कोलिप और मैक्लियोड के साथ शेयर किया। उसके बाद एक हुआ सैंगर को, जिन्होंने इंसुलिन का स्ट्रक्चर मालूम किया यूके से। फिर एक डोरोथी हॉजकिन थी, जिन्होंने इंसुलिन का टर्शियरी स्ट्रक्चर मालूम किया। तो इस तरह से, और बाद में ऑफकोर्स जो रोजालिन येलो और बर्सन ने जो उसका ऐसे किया। तो इंसुलिन पहला प्रोटीन था जिसकी सीक्वेंसिंग हुई, उसका स्ट्रक्चर क्या है। इंसुलिन पहला था जिसका थर्ड टर्शियरी स्ट्रक्चर मालूम हुआ। तो ये इतना इम्पोर्टेंट मॉलिक्यूल है बायो केमिस्ट्री में या बायोटेक्नोलॉजी में, जिसका कि पहले जिसको एक्सट्रैक्ट किया गया, प्योरिफिकेशन किया गया, फिर उसका सिंथेसिस हुआ। तो ये सब पॉसिबल था जब रिकॉम्बिनेंट डीएनए टेक्नोलॉजी 1980 में आई। फिर ह्यूमन इंसुलिन बना, और मुझे कहना चाहिए कि ह्यूमन इंसुलिन वेस्टर्न कंट्री में ही बनता था, क्योंकि उस प्रोसेस को स्केल करने के लिए, सिंथेसिस करने के लिए जो टेक्नोलॉजी थोड़ी डिफिकल्ट थी। मगर बहुत गर्व की बात है कि इंडिया में, वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड से बाहर इंडिया पहला कंट्री था जिसमें ह्यूमन इंसुलिन बना, वोकार्ट ने बनाया, और बाद में लेटर ऑन बायोकॉम्स भी फील्ड में आया। तो ये जो ऑपरेशन इंडिया का इस पे रोल रहा है कि उन्होंने कहा, ऑफ कोर्स ये इंसुलिन बायोसिमिलर कहे जाते थे, मगर वो कंट्रोवर्सी भी अब बात करेंगे जो टाइम होगा तो। मगर ये इंसुलिन इतने ही अच्छे हैं जैसे कोई भी दुनिया का दूसरा इंसुलिन है। तो ये थोड़ा प्रोग्रेस जो इंडिया में हुआ वो मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूँ। तो उसके बाद में हाँ, वो जो ये एनालॉग्स आए, तो एनालॉग्स आए करीब 2000 के आसपास। उसके 3-4 साल पहले लाइस्प्रो आया, उसके बाद में दूसरे एनालॉग आए। और अब तो एनालॉग की स्पीड जितनी बढ़ गई कि हर 1-2 साल में नया एनालॉग आ रहा है। तो उसके बारे में आगे दूसरे मेरे साथी लोग बात करेंगे। तो इस तरह से ये जो प्रोग्रेस आई है 1920 से अब तक, वो प्रोग्रेस अब बहुत फास्ट हो गई है। और अब आप और भी नई चीजें देखेंगे जिसके बारे में हम थोड़ी बात आगे जाकर करेंगे।
So thank you, sir. Dr. Vinod Kumar, sir, has put in perspective how insulin was invented or discovered, and he has highlighted the role of Benting and, of course, the other team members. And then Dr. Chandalia, sir, took us forward with his journey of insulin. He began using insulin in 1962. He reminds us that at that time, the insulin was impure. It had a short duration of action. The delivery devices were very crude, and it was quite difficult treating patients with insulin. Now, according to sir, and we all agree that we are grateful to him and to all his colleagues for their leadership. Now things are much easier for us as diabetes care providers. We were talking of 1921. 1921 was another special year for India because Vishwabharati University in Shantiniketan was instituted. Dr. A.K. Das sir is one of the best teachers of India. And Shantiniketan or Vishwabharati University is known as a leader in teaching methodology, in pedagogy. Dr. A.K. Das sir, when did you first learn about insulin as a student? How easy was it to understand? And even today, how much place does insulin occupy in our MBBS or MD curriculum? On one side, Dr. Chandalia sir is saying that 4 Nobel Prizes have been given to insulin. Do we get even 4 hours of insulin coverage in MBBS and MD?
I think the question you have asked is absolutely relevant. I will hasten to add that no, the insulin discovery was introduced to me by Professor B. Tripathi. I joined medical school in 1967. I joined clinical posting in 1969 when I was posted with Dr. Tripathi. He said, Ashok, the insulin discovery has 4 important things which you can never ever forget. Number 1 is sharing and caring, which as just now, as Dr. Professor Vinod Kumar sir said, the Benting and Best shared with Colip and MacLeod. Secondly, he said the second most important thing, that age is no bar to discovery or advance in science. He used to tell us Langerhans discovered the islets when he was 21 years old. On his 21st birthday, he discovered that. Third thing was something very great, sir, I must tell you. He said, do you know, Ashok, that the entire patent rights of insulin was given to the Toronto Institute, which Sanjeev alluded to, for $3 Canadian. $3 Canadian. And they said that each one of us will receive $1 as the patenting fee, because insulin belongs to humanity. And the fourth most important thing, what he used to say, and which Vinod Kumar sir and Chandalia sir has said very vividly. I really congratulate both of you, sir, for beautifully telling your experience. He used to say that the advances in insulin are relentless. Very beautifully, Vinod Kumar sir said, on the October 30th, 1920, the Banting hit upon the idea that the pancreatic extract can cure diabetes, Sanjay. And he wrote in one of the books which I have with me, it's called Liabilities. The first liability is to ligate the duct of the pancreas of the dog and wait till the acini are die. Then the extract will come out the insulin. Second liability, to inject it in the purest form and reduce blood sugar. That was in October 31st, 1920. And in July 30th, the first extract was given to the dog. And in 1921, 11th January, it was given most impure form, and 22 in the most pure form. So beautiful. Vinod Kumar sir, you said beautifully. It is subtlest route, Sanjay, to the discovery of the most important discovery. But what you have asked me is very pertinent. While I joined the third clinical year and was posted in Dr. Bibi Tripaঠি's diabetes ward, we had only two insulin: animal insulin, and that time we had something called monocomponent insulin. The animal we knew that animal insulin should not be given to, can be given to everybody except the pregnant ladies. Remember, sir, we used to say pregnant ladies must use only human insulin. And that time we did, and we had NPH. We had NPH with great help. Gradually kept the other insulins. And I must tell you, Sanjay, the discovery of insulin is exactly what Chandalia sir vividly, he did a program recently. I was there. He invited me to chair it. He vividly said all about the various insulin. But equally was the advances in the delivery system. So remember, the first insulin that Elizabeth Beck, the girl, took was a 5 ml syringe, Sanjay. And in 5 ml syringe, he was given the fruit extract. She used to take it because 2 cc can be given in the syringe. It took 20 minutes for one injection, and 3 times she has to be given for the 5th injection. And today, we have the pens, the what we call hair prick. Unlike Hindi song, we say, "Pehle kyun nahi mile?" Why these syringes were not available before. So the discovery of insulin has also matched the discovery of the devices. I must tell you, Sanjay, the discovery of the syringe, even disposable pen syringe, then the pen syringe, then the syringe with the needle, then came the pen, the disposable pen, and then came the pumps. And once she is an adept in the insulin pumps, and the first generation, second generation, third generation, human pancreas. It was not totally successful. And today, the advances is giving the stem cell in the stomach and programming it to produce insulin. It's a great scientific story. So I started my career when we had only NPH and animal insulin. We had something called monocomponent. I don't remember whether the monocomponent insulin was too much used, but these are the two insulins used. But NPH was great that time. And then the other insulins came, and I remember vividly using one after the other from the Actrapid to the various other insulins. Then came the mixtures, then came the short, long acting. And the analogs gave us a great benefit because of its easiness of administration. That time we never knew of the flexibility. We knew that you give injection, you give the food. You don't have to wait. So the hypoglycemia can be avoided. That was simple teaching that time we had. The last question you asked, Sanjay, is very significant. The product which won 8 people Nobel Prizes is not given, even forget about 8 hours. It's a very short duration. You know how much time is given? Entire diabetes is taught in 3 classes. In the integrated teaching in the modern method, we have about 2 days, that is 2.5 days. And you go to any ward today, I will agree, both the teachers are here. You see on your left, on your right, on your front, on your back, there's a diabetic patient. So the curriculum of the postgraduate, I'm not talking undergraduate curriculum, that is not too little talked about. In the postgraduate curriculum today also, do not give importance to diabetes. There's no diabetes given in the word. Like they say, no symptom, no examination, not given the exam, they don't read that thing. So it's a very, very step mother. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you, sir. We were speaking of 1921, and sir has taken us fast forward. also identified some of the challenges that he faced when he was a student, when he was a resident, using insulins, which maybe were not of as good quality as they are today. But from Dr. Das, we never heard even once any complaint. All we heard was that he was grateful that they had insulins. He was grateful that they had human insulins for the antenatal ladies. I think that is the spirit that we must have. You can be optimistic, you can be pessimistic, but the best way is to be realistic. So realism means you take charge of whatever you have and use it in the best way possible. 1921 was famous, like we said, for India, Satyajit Ray and Sahir Ludhianvi, and also for Rosalind Yallow and insulin. 1937 was another special year. In America, the first blood bank was created in Chicago. American Diabetes Association was created in America, 1937. And this ADA has created now a framework where we can all learn about diabetes, irrespective of whether it is taught to us in our PG curriculum or not. But in India also, two very important personalities was born. One was Ratan Tata, who built an empire of business. And the other one was Dr. Vinod Kumar, sir, who built an empire of diabetes care for us. Ratan Tata may have touched many people through his businesses, through his work, and we are grateful for his contribution to the country, to the globe. But we are also grateful to Dr. Vinod Kumar, sir. Your students, indirectly, and their students have touched the lives of so many millions of Indians living with diabetes. And we are all able to live happily with diabetes because of what you have taught us. Question to you, sir, is when did you first learn about the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, about insulin requiring and non-insulin requiring? What is the terminology that you used in the 1960s, 70s, 80s? How did that change? Did your teachers ever scold you for using the wrong terms? And when did you prescribe insulin to a type 2 diabetic, whom we would currently term as type 2 diabetes, for the first time? Could you reminisce about that, sir?
Okay. Thank you very much for comparing me to Ratan Tata. Of course, I don't deserve it at all. But anyway, answering to your question, it's a very interesting question and of a great historical importance. And I have certain comments to offer to your beautiful question. As you said, having born about 15 to 16 years after the discovery of insulin, it was just 40th year of discovery of insulin, like today's 40th episode of Diabetes Bytes, that I became a registered medical practitioner and I started using. And the first I remember having seen and used insulin 1961 when I was a house physician, having passed MBBS. There used to be no internship, and the most vivid memory that I used to have is not to use insulin for a routine diabetic, but often those diabetics who came in ketoacidosis. And you will be surprised that dose that we used to give at that time is 50 units of insulin subcutaneous and 50 units intravenous. And all this insulin used to have, although a dramatic effect, but a very unpredictable effect. And when this insulin was given to such patients on a long-term basis, the greatest problem that we were facing was the antibody production. Lots and lots of insulin had to be given. And coming to your question of type 1 versus type 2, you will be surprised that during the early 70s and late 60s, the type of diabetics which I used to see, particularly after having come to All India Institute of Medical Sciences, was not so much of type 1 diabetes, which we used to call at that time as growth onset diabetes or juvenile diabetes. That was the term that we were using, but they were not common at all, once in a while. And when they would come, often they would come with ketoacidosis and coma, and we would take them out, and there was an order from the head of the department: if anybody of ketosis and coma dies today, the person will be dismissed. No questions will be asked. So we were all very careful, but still, in spite of our careful, I remember those examples when patients of diabetic coma would silently pass into hypoglycemic coma as a result of our unpredictable delivery of insulin. And when they would get up and they would recover and open their eyes, we used to be very, very happy and rewarding kind of experience. As far as the second type of diabetes, that is, we used to call at that time as maturity onset diabetes. Sometimes we used to also call them elderly diabetics, but more often maturity onset diabetics. Now you will be surprised that the maturity onset diabetes, which is now the equivalent of type 2 diabetes of today, was not that common as it is today. We used to see once in a while. And the total in 1971 to 74 ICMR collaborative study, of which I was a part, the prevalence of diabetes in India was 1.8% only. But I would like to draw your attention to another variety which we were seeing in abundance. They were all Leonard Thompson. They were J type of diabetes, ketosis resistant young diabetes. They were people with the bones and flesh. They were very weak, malnourished. But if you don't give them the insulin, nothing will happen. They will not go into coma. They were ketosis resistant. But at the same time, they will not respond to oral drugs either. And as the time passed on, when we used to treat these patients with insulin, we could keep them relatively under control. But we were not sure what we are doing, because by giving insulin, we were not even keeping them alive. They were already alive on their own. They were not going into ketosis. But over the course of years, what I found, that as the nutrition problem disappeared, this entity of malnutrition modulated diabetes, which was a brainchild of Dr. Tripathi, is disappeared. And it was no longer a part of international classification. ADA doesn't have it anymore. So I would say from India, this was a breakthrough, although it was a breakthrough in slow motion, but it was a breakthrough. So all that has all gone. And I would like to give 2 or 3 more relevant comments from the historical perspective. And that is that when we used to give this insulin to these people, apart from the insulin antibody they were producing, and we had to give sometimes 100 or even 200 units. And at that time, the definition of insulin resistance was use of more than 200 units in 24 hours. And although our pancreas produces only 35 to 40 units per day, but why we were giving 200 units or 150 units? Because of the antibodies. That was one problem. The second thing, which is often not discussed, is that when we used to give this insulin through the glass syringes, there was a unfounded or founded, I don't know, belief that 25% of this insulin gets absorbed to the glass surface of the syringe and you are losing. So in that case, if we have to give 20 units of an insulin through the glass syringe, we should better give 25 units, because 5 units will get absorbed to the glass. That was a belief which was running on. Then I think the last point that I would like to tell you, that in 1968, I moved to USA for my training in diabetes to an institution called Hammersmith Hospital, which at that time was mecca of research. And I used to watch a lot of my things. I was, of course, not allowed to touch my patients. I was mainly a research fellow, but I did see, and as soon as I reached there, that was 27 September 1969. This was just 1 month after the demise of Dr. R.D. Lawrence on 27th of August 1968. He was a personality of his own. He was one of those famous people who was destined to die when he was young, but he got a letter from London that insulin has come back to London, and he was given insulin. And after he recovered and he remained on lifelong insulin, he donated his entire cause of his career to the cause of diabetes. He was the founder of British Diabetic Association, now Diabetes UK. And as I entered UK, within 3-4 months, I had to attend a British Diabetic Association meeting, and I can never forget the awe and the memory of R.D. Lawrence in the eyes of British diabetologists, and for that matter, the entire world. So, but having come back from UK, we forged a very close collaboration with Novo Industry. They became our business-friendly partners. It was a perfect blend of academia and industry. And Dr. Pedersen and Christian Nielsen from Novo, Denmark, they used to make frequent visits to India. They were meeting me, and we were very lucky that in 1975, we got an uninterrupted complimentary supply of 2 insulins, Act Rapid and Rapidard. These are not the insulins which we are talking now that Dr. Das was talking, Act Rapid human, but these were the insulins which were from bovine and porcine sources. Before this Act Rapid and Rapidard, all attempts to combine the lent insulin with a short-acting insulin in the same vial were fruitless. They were abandoned. But this Act-Rapid and Rapid-R insulin, Act-Rapid was a porcine insulin, Rapid-R was an insulin in which 75% was a long-acting bovine-porcine combination and 25% was Act-Rapid from purely porcine in the same vial. So we started using in a very large number of patients this Act-Rapid and Rapid-R of the animal source, and we found because they were purified, we compared these insulin with our conventional dirty short-acting, intermediate-acting, long-acting, single dose, multiple doses. We gave all those comparisons, and we used to draw the samples of the patient 8 times a day and calculate a M factor, which was at that time a measure of glycemic control, taking into account both the negativity of hypoglycemia and the negativity of hyperglycemia. And we found that Act-Rapid and Rapid-R insulin were much better than the dirty conventional insulin that we had. This work we continued, and I published this in a book on diabetes on 16 pages, the problem of insulin therapy and its immunological problem. So that was a great day in my life, and these insulins hadn't come in India. They were all complementary. And then later on, we continued our business blend with Novo companies. And when they invited me in 1985 to Denmark, I visited their company. And this Pedersen, who happened to be, who hesitatingly told me that he's the son or the grandson of the founder of Novo Industry, but he is now an employee because they had made a foundation. But when in 1985 I visited his factory, Pedersen took out something from his upper pocket of his jacket and asked me, "What is this?" I said, "It is a pen." Then he said, "It doesn't write. It has some other purpose." And we are now going to take it out into the market. And that is how I was associated with the invention of pen as a mute witness. And this is a pen which came. And the last point that I would like to say, that I had been to certain places in England, like Guy's Hospital, where Dr. Harry Keane, who was the discoverer of microalbuminuria, he was there, and his assistant, Dr. J.C. Pickup, who was the inventor of the subcutaneous insulin infusion. So I had a little bit of association with these two individuals. A book of diabetes was edited by Pickup, in which I had given the chapter on epidemiology of diabetes. So I have very, very sweet memories of use of insulin and so many other partnerships with the international community, and also about the ongoing progress. And by the year 2000 or 96, 97, as was mentioned by Dr. Das, the insulin analogs had come, and I was preparing for my retirement in 1997. And after my retirement, I started devoting my lot of time to teaching and to social activism for the elderly senior citizens, and was giving only limited time to my clinical practice. So I really don't have so much of experience as far as the designer insulins or the insulin analogs are concerned. But I think I have narrated the entire history of all the insulin therapy as far as this country is concerned. Thank you so much.
थैंक यू सर. हमने आपसे पूछा था टाइप 1 और टाइप 2 के बारे में, मगर आपने एक तीसरी डायबिटीज भी हमारे लिए क्रिएट कर दी. टाइप 1 डायबिटीज quite easy to recognize. They come in coma, and but very rare when you were practicing. Sir, आप हंसेंगे. A few years ago, I asked a person who had just completed DM from AIMS, what is the difference between meningitis and DKA? तो आंसर क्या था? In meningitis there is altered sensorium. In DKA there is no altered sensorium. मैंने उसको तो सर जैसे आप हंस रहे हैं, मैंने उसको यही कहा, तो इस सदी में है तो ये जवाब चल रहा है, एम्स के बीच में चल रहा है, सड़क क्रॉस करके सफदरजंग चल जाओ तो भी ये जवाब नहीं चलेगा, और हमें प्रीवियस सेंचुरी वालों को हमसे पूछो तो ऐसे ही हंसेंगे जैसे हम सब हंस रहे हैं. So, the credit, sir, goes to you and to all your colleagues, Dr. Chandalia sir, Dr. Das sir, for having taught us how to prevent coma. That is why our students today are able to say that there is no altered sensorium in DK, because they've not seen it. When you talk of type 1 and type 2, आपने type 2 भी describe किया, but you also created a new term, pancreatic diabetes, malnutrition related diabetes, ketosis resistant diabetes of the young. I work in Haryana, which is perhaps the richest state in the country. I still see a lot of malnutrition related diabetes. It is limited to 1 or 2 specific ethnic groups. It comes from the rural populations, both male and female. But why I am able to make out, why I am able to manage, is because I had seen those patients during my fellowship, during DM. So thank you, sir, for all the teaching. You may have retired, but your teaching still continues. Dr. Chandalia sir, Dr. Vinod Kumar sir ने बात की about, he talked about biphasic insulin, which was a mixture of porcine and porcine bovine mixture. What about insulin preparations? 1921 was also famous for another Nobel Prize, Albert Einstein. He won the Nobel Prize for his discovery of the photoelectric effect. And Dr. Vinod Kumar sir जो हमें कह रहे थे, it was something like photoelectric effect. You put two insulins together, कभी गड़बड़ हो जाती है, कभी बिल्कुल ठीक चल पड़ते हैं. So when did you begin using biphasic insulins? When did you get them for the first time in your practice, and what happened?
I think I started using them in the US for 4 years, 1967 to 70. They were available there much earlier than they were available here. And when I came back for a while again, I was using dirty insulins until Novos started somewhere in Delhi. That's how they probably caught Dr. Vinod Kumar first, you see. And I used to, request the doctor in Novo to give me this newer insulin to use in my patients who had bad allergy to the local, dirty insulin, what we used to call contaminated insulin. So, and I also remember very interesting anecdote of when earlier on, then this insulin started getting marketed by Novo in India, but very sporadically it will be produced and will be given to you. And it was with a company called Sarabhai Chemicals. Now, Sarabhai was an excellent old company, but it did not have the dynamism of really marketing it properly. So when this same Pedersen, which Dr. Vinod Kumar mentioned, he was brought by Sarabhai people to see me in Mumbai in my clinic. And there was a really bad showdown. Now, I told him that, are you serious about marketing your insulin in India? There is such a great need for our, lakhs and lakhs of patients. Then why do you have this interrupted supply? Why can't you make it better? And I was almost, indignant. And then he really got the clue that we must go to India in a big way. This was probably some of them for quite some time remember that as an important point which made them decide that they must market this insulin in India. In fact, there is a need for this insulin. I became familiar with insulin resistance a little later, I must tell you that. I had a lot to do with it because while in US we started measuring insulin. This was hardly 6 or 7 or 8 years since the assay was described by Rosalind Yellow and Burson. So it was difficult to do the assay. All of us had to raise whole kit by yourself. You have to inject the guinea pig, raise the antibodies. You have to label the with iodine, radioiodine. So all that we have done. I have done with my hands. And we do it with a large number of assays. And we showed insulin resistance almost at the same time as Gerald Revan, who is, credited with describing insulin resistance. We showed that in not only in obese diabetics and obese non-diabetics also. There was one paper, but second one was in diabetes, early diabetes, even if they're lean or obese. Obese will have a lot more insulin, others will have less. So this was type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance concept coming up. And that concept, again, I saw clinically. I came back to India to practice, and my professor, very kind, Dr. Talwalkar was there. Dr. Sate was there, who was Vice Chancellor later on of University of Mumbai. Very great people and very kind and knowledgeable people. And they quietly would tell me I was using a lot more insulin than oral drugs because I had participated in a study in USA called UGDP study. It's a very notorious study in a way. It was something very interesting. It was a good study of that time, particular. That was the way it could be done at that time. And it showed that oral agents at the time of tolbutamide can kill more people. So it is injurious. Even now we think that sulfonylurea are injurious to cardiovascular system and therefore should use insulin. So I started using more and more insulin when I got back in India. So my professor very kindly told me, Dr. Chandalia, do you think that sometimes by giving insulin also people don't respond these what they call maturity onset diabetic, these little overweight people and all, they don't respond to insulin very well? They said that we have seen that we add this old tolbutamide or chlorpropamide oral agent, they respond very well. See, a little later metformin are there, so we add that. So they very gently made me understand that they like insulin resistance clinical, and that can be broken by adding oral agents to insulin therapy, which I think holds true even today. You see, type 2 diabetes, what we call now maturity onset diabetic, you see, is called now type 2 diabetes. So there, when you use even optimized insulin therapy, you'll have to use some means of addressing the issue of insulin resistance. So this was some my brush in the research wise, several publications on insulin levels in variety of situations and insulin resistance. See, so the ectrapid and monotard insulin, and then later on mixed tard came, and the mixtures held sway for a long time, 30, 70. But slowly, a lot of us who handle type 1 diabetes, difficult ones, realize that the mixtures, pre-mixed insulins don't exactly give you what you want. And you really have to individualize, and by giving multiple basal bolus treatment. So some of us became great proponents of basal bolus therapy for young diabetic. We used to call them juvenile diabetic. Now we call them type 1. And now, of course, there's so many subsets of coming. These both we know are omnibus terms. Type 2 definitely omnibus term. There are so many varieties of type 2 that slowly people are classifying these days. But I think our knowledge in that area is still very at a very low state of knowledge. See, and type 1 also, now we are finding heterogeneity and separating out the young diabetics into variety of young diabetics in general. So I think the science, you see, always keeps advancing, and as we go along, it always gets more and more exciting, and our capacity to help our patients improves. So this is what has happened. And this development of insulin really almost history of developing protein chemistry in the world, and side by side, I think this was one of the most eminent example of a molecule studied so closely, used so widely, and helps people directly. So this was a molecule in par excellence, which can do all these things. No such molecule has ever appeared on the scene for the human treatment.
थैंक यू सर. डॉक्टर चंडालिया सर ने बहुत ब्यूटीफुली डिस्क्राइब किया, डॉक्टर विनोद कुमार सर ने डिस्क्राइब किया डाइवर्सिटी ऑफ डायबिटीज, अलग अलग तरह के मरीज, और अब डॉक्टर चंडालिया सर ने हमारे लिए डिस्क्राइब किया अलग अलग तरह के इंसुलिन्स. ऋग्वेद में भी कहा जाता है द ट्रूथ इज वन बट द पाथ्स टू इट आर मेनी. तो सच्चाई एक है, बट देयर आर मेनी वेज ऑफ रीचिंग दैट सच्चाई. दैट इज ट्रू फॉर आवर कल्चर, फॉर आवर कंट्री. इट इज ऑल्सो ट्रू फॉर इंसुलिन. Dr. A.K. Das sir, what about insulin delivery devices? Both Dr. Vinod sir and Dr. Chandalia sir have alluded to this, how difficult it was to deliver insulin earlier. What about now? Dr. Vinod talked about when he first saw the insulin pen coming out from Dr. Peterson's pocket. When did you first encounter modern delivery devices?
I think, Sanjay, this is a very pertinent question. Before that, I'll just allude to two things. Please allow me. Number one, there was one other doctor called P.G. Verghese. Dr. G. Verghese described the fibrocalculous pancreatic diabetes, which you alluded to, and also it was mentioned as a malnutrition borderline diabetes. So he described 586 cases presented in Journal of Diabetes Federation Congress and published a book. So that FCPD was a product, was a boost from India. So I must remember him today because he was also a great person who discovered the use of insulin, who were, as pointed out by both Chandalia sir and Dr. Vinod Kumar sir, this was also insulin resistant, Sanjay. And the second person I like to remember was a person who did a lot of work in the insulin knowledge dissemination. Sanjay, he was Sam G.P. Burgess, popularly called SGPM. I must tell you, I think Chandalia would remember, sir, he started a journal called Islated. He developed a branch of science called insulinology, and he also developed the first department of diabetes in the country. Swisha took it over. It started by Dr. SGPM in the Madras Medical College. Now, coming to your question of the delivery devices, Sanjay, I remember my days when we had to rely on the sliding scale, which we call today sliding scale. You remember, sir? And we had clear-cut instruction: 10 if it is orange, if it is 20, if it is yellow, and 30 if it is red. And the delivery devices were, Sanjay, the needle and the syringes. And that was very cumbersome to handle. The insulin needles were there. The BD developed the insulin needles quite fast. They developed insulin needles. BD developed needles very fast, and they have done a good job by these needles. But I must tell you that the most important thing that happened was the discovery of the finer needles. So patients accepted it better. And second thing, also the syringes, which also become portable. There was a glass syringe, like pain today, for portable syringe. You won't believe, Sanjay. Portable the glass and needle syringe, which can be portable by the patient, not very long, not like a pen, portable. Then one fine morning, we had the insulin pens. And the acceptance of insulin pens was very slow. I must tell you, I worked in government institutes, SCB, there in Japan, and I must tell you, it was much, much less. I must also tell you what Dr. Vinod Kumar alluded to. When I went to England for 2 years, my first posting was in the Lawrence Ward, R.D. Lawrence Ward, in the King's College. He established diabetes department, Vinodji, in the King's College Hospital. When I went there were 3 sentences which were written, which I brought and put in Japan. I have told you before, Sanjay, it was called Discuss, Don't Argue in the conference hall. Second was diabetic patients live in spite of us. Because a lot of and that was what he said. He used to say that insulin is a double-edged sword. And he said that if in your word a ketosis patient dies, it reflects your word. Exactly what was written there. But that's what Dr. Ahuja used to say. If a patient of see the real delivery devices started improving from the when we first had the syringes, needles, and then following that we which was great. One was the pumps. You remember the insulin pump which from the Madras Medical College? It was like a small who was afforded by that. It was I don't Germany from FIFO he brought it. He bought it from FIFO, but it was very used because it's a huge room attached to a patient. And patient used to put that like our the girls and boys put the backpack. It's a very big backpack to move around for the continuous insulin delivery system. So we had passed through the needle and syringe, needles by the BD. The BD was the only company, to my mind, was giving the best needles that time. Then we developed the portable insulin, portable syringes. Then we developed the pens, but pens were very sparingly used. I must tell you, it was very costly. And in government hospitals that I worked from SCB, and even in England, very conservative. They don't go for the new things immediately. They use that for much less. But today, pen is rampant, the cost has come down. The disposable pens and the reusable pens cost most approaching the cost of the needle and syringe. So that was the delivery devices I had that time. Before I close, I'll tell you one more thing, Sanjay, which is very important, that the human insulin came in 1973. But it came to market in a big way in 1982. It was, as discussed sometime earlier, it was Eli Lilly which brought the insulin Lispro for the first time, which was analog insulin. And then they're also created with bringing more and more human insulin. The Sanofi also brought human insulin. They introduced quite early they introduced the Glargine, and in 2015 they introduced Tibro. Novo introduced the Novorapid, Rapitard, and they also introduced the insulin Degrade, into the co-formulation for the first time in the country. And they are also trying for the newer insulin delivery devices, which also has built-in technology. Now we call protein. You only called me for that meeting. They only call protein in a pill. Remember, Sanjay, 2-3 weeks back,
Yes, sir.
protein in a pill. So that protein in a pill was revelatious. I put the same protein that is insulin in a pill, whether the orally work, and I'm told a company called OraMed is almost quite advanced in developing that. So Sanjay, to make a long story short, insulin delivery devices was absolutely, and we have to give insulin. Tell you, Patisha will tell, we have to give insulin. We have to do the insulin examination, not the, and we have to write the color and then give it. By the blood flow. Then we had the syringes, plastic syringes, we had disposable syringes, long duration syringes, then came the pens, then came the very crude pump, then came the finer pumps, and that is discovered.
Right.
Insulin.
So what Sir has told us, thank you Sir, is that of course we are talking today about the history of insulin, but insulin अपनी जगह important है, insulin delivery devices अपनी जगह important है, वो भी शायर कह गए उर्दू में, मंजिलें अपनी जगह, रास्ते अपनी जगह. So the manzil or wherever you need insulin, that has its importance, but insulin technique also has its own importance. Remember to use insulin properly. उन्हीं शायर ने कहा है, सफर अपनी जगह, हम सफर अपनी जगह. So when you're on a journey, of course the journey is important. You should know where you are going, where you are coming from, but whom you're traveling with, your traveling companions are important. And you see from all our patrons, the message they're talking about Dr. Verghese, about Dr. Sanji Moses, about Dr. Ahuja. In the same breath, Dr. Das mentioned Madras Medical College. Dr. Vinod Kumar sir mentioned Dr. Ahuja. Dr. Ahuja came from Multan in present-day Pakistan. Multani blessing for all those who are listening to this webinar today. Kadai vela na beti. May you never sit idle. I think this is what Dr. Ahuja sir stood for. Kabhi khali mat baithna. May you never sit idle. Dr. Ahuja moved from Multan to Madras for education, but his family moved from Multan to Karnal in present-day Haryana. And so this legacy continues to live here. Dr. Vinod Kumar sir, before we conclude with the final comments from everybody, what do you remember about Dr. Ahuja? What message would he have said, apart from Kadai Vela to all of us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Well, I was associated with Dr. Ahuja right from the beginning. We began organizing the endocrine unit in the Department of Medicine in 1965. I was at that time only senior resident, but in 67 I entered the faculty, and he was still an associate professor. He was 8 years older to me. He was a hard task master, but he was a friend of friend. He was my friend also, and we were together, had very cordial relations, and a lot of foreign visitors used to come, and we used to take lot of pride in welcoming them and organizing their lectures together. And some of them were Dr. Burson, who was the boss of Dr. Rosalind Yellow. Later, Rosalind Yellow also came. I met her over a dinner. And then Dr. Harry Keane and Jared, and so many people used to come. Dr. Pfeiffer from Germany. And then Dr. Pfeiffer was so good enough. He was so impressed by the appreciation that Dr. Ahuja gave about me to Pfeiffer, that Pfeiffer, in 1969, he invited me for a lecture in the University of Ulm. And at that time I was very young, and he gave me some amount of money also for giving the lecture. So we had a very close relation with Dr. Ahuja. But I would wholeheartedly support you in your statement. वो जो मुल्तान की बात है, वेला कदे ना बैठी, वो वेले तो कभी बैठते ही नहीं थे, और उनका वेला ना बैठना जो है वो ऐसा मेरे जेनेटिक मटेरियल में आ गया है कि मैं अभी तक वेला नहीं बैठ रहा हूँ. तो वो डॉक्टर आहूजा की ये बड़ी खास बात है. और डॉक्टर आहूजा के जो उन्होंने उसके डायबिटीज के अलावा उन्होंने प्रोग्रेस इन मेडिसिन की सीरीज ऑफ बुक्स लिखी हैं. सुबह 7:30 बजे आ जाते थे, वहां पे वो किताबें लिखते थे और मेरे कमरे में आ जाते थे, विनोद कुमार जी जरा इसको एडिट कर दो, वो कर दो. बड़ा उनके साथ मेरा रिश्ता अच्छा रहा है. उसके बाद जब मैं 78 में मैं जब पीजीआई चंडीगढ़ चला गया लीव वैकेंसी पे, तो डॉक्टर आहूजा ने कहा तुम बहुत बड़ी गलती कर रहे हो, तुम मेरा साथ छोड़ रहे हो. मैंने कहा जी मैं तो असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर से सीधा प्रोफेसर एंड हेड बन रहा हूँ, मैं तो जाऊंगा जरूर. तो जब मैं लौट के आया, तो 1 साल बाद जब मैं लौट के आया, तो फिर वो नाराज होने लगे. यार तू चला गया था और तू उस वक्त अकेली एक ही कुर्सी थी पूरे इंडिया में एंडोक्रिनोलॉजी की पीजीआई चंडीगढ़ में. बोले मैं भी प्रोफेसर ऑफ मेडिसिन हूँ, सिर्फ तुम प्रोफेसर ऑफ एंडोक्रिनोलॉजी छोड़ के क्यों आ गए. मैंने कहा जी मेरे को तो दिल्ली में ही अच्छा लगता है. So these were the relations that we had, and I think my mentor was Dr. Ahuja, and I think I would say that whatever my personality has evolved over so many decades, this of course has lot of bearing to my parents and to my family. But I think a good part of my family, which is good part of my personality even till now, it does reflect what Dr. Ahuja taught me. मेरे को आगे बढ़ा देते थे, ये कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑर्गेनाइज कर, वो कर, वहां भाग, वहां दौड़, RSSDI को रजिस्टर कराने जा। 50 रुपए मेरी जेब में से खर्च हो गए उस वक्त, मुझे बड़ा बुरा लगा। वो मुझे आज तक वापस नहीं मिले, RSSDI ने पैसे ही नहीं दिए वापस। तो ये सारी बातें मुझे इतनी अच्छी लगती हैं सोच सोच के। तो ये सब बातें। लास्ट पॉइंट ये, डॉक्टर चंडालिया से मैं एक बात ये कहना चाह रहा था कि ये जो रैपिटार्ड और एक्ट रैपिड इंसुलिन जो है, ये इंडिया में कभी आई नहीं थी कमर्शियल के लिए, जो जहां तक कि एनिमल की बात है, एनिमल सोर्स वाली हम लोगों ने कंपनी में, हाँ, इट नेवर केम एक्चुअली। उसके बाद मोनोकॉम्पोनेंट इंसुलिन आ गई थी, और मोनोकॉम्पोनेंट इंसुलिन वी हैड यूज्ड इन अबंडेंस एंड वी हैड लॉट ऑफ पेपर्स। एंड डॉक्टर चंडालिया, आपने एक किताब छापी थी, मेडिसिन अपडेट, उसमें मेरा एक चैप्टर है, एक्सपीरियंस विद मोनोकॉम्पोनेंट इंसुलिन, यू रिमेंबर दैट। एंड जापी में भी हमारे पेपर्स हैं। उसके बाद फिर ह्यूमन इंसुलिन आ गई, और ह्यूमन इंसुलिन के बाद तो फिर स्टोरी सब रिसेंट ही हो गई है। तो ये सारी बातें जो हैं आहूजा साहब के बारे में मैं आपको बताना चाहूंगा। थैंक यू।
किताबें जब मैंने डीएम एंट्रेंस एग्जाम देना था, तो एक एक चैप्टर, एक एक पैराग्राफ, एक एक सेंटेंस, इवन कॉमा फुल स्टॉप तक मुझे याद है। सर, जो टाइपोस थे आपके, वो भी मुझे याद है अभी तक। डीएम एंट्रेंस के लिए मैंने आपकी किताबें आप दोनों की पढ़ी हैं। डॉक्टर चंडालिया सर, डॉक्टर विनोद कुमार सेड के मुल्तानी लोग कभी वेला नहीं बैठते, खाली नहीं बैठते। एंड डॉक्टर आहूजा's teaching is reaching not only Dr. Vinod Kumar and sir, also Amit Gupta and Purvi Chawla, who are our social media experts from RSSDI. But it is said that Mumbai is the city that never sleeps. So, can you, in a couple of sentences, just tell us about the role of education along with insulin? अगर मैं सिर्फ इंसुलिन लिख दूं पेशेंट को, is that enough? या do I have to add value to that prescription? And could you talk about your journey? आप 40 साल पहले क्या करते थे, आप क्या करते हैं?
पेशेंट एजुकेशन की जर्नी भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, क्योंकि जब तक पेशेंट को सिखाया नहीं जाए, ये बीमारी आप अच्छा कंट्रोल में नहीं ला सकते। तो पेशेंट एजुकेशन, जब मैंने प्रैक्टिस शुरू की 1971 में बैक फ्रॉम यूएस, उस वक्त बहुत कम था। मगर मुझे मालूम है कि शुरू से मैंने एक न्यूट्रिशन ग्रेजुएट को एम्प्लॉय किया, हमेशा डाइट सिखाएगी, और फिर उनको थोड़ा ट्रेन करता था कि इंसुलिन इंजेक्शन भी सिखाओ, कैसे सिरिंजेस की देगा, हाँ कैसे शॉट लेना। तो वो उन लोगों को हम एजुकेटर की तरह यूज़ करते थे, और दी एजुकेशन धीरे धीरे अच्छा डेवलप हुआ। दिल्ली में बिसाइड्स डॉक्टर जो विनोद कुमार साहब ने कहा, और मेरा भी डॉक्टर आहूजा के साथ बहुत क्लोज एसोसिएशन रहा। वी आर वेरी फॉन्ड ऑफ ईच अदर। एंड वो जो इंटरनेशनल जर्नल ऑफ डायबिटीज इन डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज, जो कि पहले डायबिटीज बुलेटिन कहा जाता था, तो डॉक्टर आहूजा एडिट कर रहे थे। थोड़ा इरेगुलर था, छोटा सा बुलेटिन था, ही वॉज वेरी डिसअपॉइंटेड। So he wanted some hard worker to take it up and do so or other. He identified me and say कि आप करो, बम्बई में ले जाओ जर्नल को और आप करो। But he was so humble with me, and people used to be quite scared of him, but he was extremely nice with me. And I used to edit the journal for Mumbai, and I made sure respectfully that he continued as my senior editor until he was alive. And all the time he would tell me, you are doing all the work, you become editor now, put me in some other position, either emeritus or whatever, but don't keep my name. But I refused to do that until he was alive. And once he thought of publishing his one article in our journal, RSSDI journal, he was so ethical that he sent the article to me, and he said that you have a look and see whether it is worth publishing. And as a policy, he and I had vowed that we will never publish our own article in the journal that we edit, because it cannot get close scrutiny. So it may be partial to yourself. So with great difficulty, then when I told him the article is good, sir, I like to do, we again sent to one more referee, and he agreed, then we published. So he was very particular about not projecting himself. Same rule I followed. In 20 years I edited, I published only my one article in that. And during my all editorship, Dr. Ahooja published only one article in our own journal. Other way around, there were some people in Mumbai who were doing journal and filling up the whole journal themselves, which killed which to kill the journal. That's the best way to kill a journal, is the editor goes on writing there, So he was very good. He was very good with me, and I think I have very close memories of Dr. Tripathi, Dr. Sam Moses, because I was, after those three stalwart, I was the next patron. So I was very close to all these three. And lot of decision making. I was the first patron after these three very senior stalwarts. And therefore I was very close to three of them. And lot of decisions made in RSSDI, very momentous decisions were made by us together. And I remember how fondly they took my opinion. I was younger by 10, 15 years from all of them, but they were very fond of me. So I have great memories of these people. When some more time when we relate to those, But I think this is very interesting moment to do that. Dr. Vinod Kumar is here, so obviously, and we are somewhat indirectly connected,
Right.
because those
Today
people were close to me. Because Dr. Ahuja used to invite me regularly to lecture, sometimes participate in CPC in Delhi at AIMS, and so I interacted with all of them very closely, his students, and they regarded me as a surrogate teacher. When Ahuja Sahab was no more, he said, "Now you are our teacher." He had told that Chandalia will look after you when I'm not there. So we had such great association.
Great.
Today has been a great day for us. I'm sure Dr. Purvi, Dr. Amit, you will agree with me. It's been like an Upanishad, like sitting at the feet of our teachers and learning so much from them, sitting so close to them. हिंदी में कहा जाता है, आंवले के खाएगा और बड़े के कहेगा, सियाने के कहेगा, बाद में पता चलता है. But we are lucky, हमें अभी पता चल गया. We have learnt about the history of insulin discovery. We've learnt about how insulin delivery devices, insulin preparations, insulin education, how these have evolved over the past century. And experience the eminence that our patrons have brought today to the table. You just cannot measure that in any unit. We'll request Dr. A.K. Das sir to conclude on behalf of all the three patrons. And then, of course, Dr. Amit and Dr. Purvi will conclude. Dr. Das sir, we've spoken about the history. We've spoken about things have evolved. What's the future of insulin? What do you foresee for the next few years? And what advice do you have for all of us? How can we do a better job?
I'm very, very passionate about the sentence which was just told to me. In 1921, both came into light. Metformin was discovered and insulin was discovered. See the status of metformin today. I'm not envious. Be it an injection, but the status that insulin has achieved in our country, it must be there. Today the insulin penetration in the country, insulin alone, is less than 20%. Insulin is oral as bits, bedtime insulin, daytime sulfuria, or oral insulin combination, it's about 30%. So I think the future lies in what you organized some time back, was about the acceptance of insulin. What Dr. Chandalia said, Dr. Vinod Kumar said, to make insulin universally accepted, to give the knowledge that insulin gives a great sense of well-being, insulin prevents complications, and quote unquote, insulin gives a longer life, and insulin for diabetes, type 2, I'm talking type 2, is a wonderful tool. Use it, feel it, and feel the difference. The new discoveries will be going from the purer of analogs to more analogs, from the degludec to the co-formulations. Every company bringing co-formulation. We have the long-acting insulins, which from degludec went to TGO bringing maybe one more, then they will stop. So the insulin discovery is relentless. So I always say relentless advance is relentless disease. But what we advance we need today, as told by my teachers, Vinod Kumar sir and Chandalia sir, they are not only teachers, Sanjay. I'm sorry, time is less, but they are also the illustrations how we should be. I have worked closely with Vinod Kumar sir. In the one-day conference Dr. Ahuja used to organize, I used to be with him. I used to eat sambar in Professor Ahuja's house. Remember, sir? There used to be a gentleman called Krishna Ram. You remember Krishna Ram, sir?
Yes.
So, and I have worked also with Chandalia sir. Chandalia sir is marvelous, to put the book in form, to bring out the book in time, to journal recognition, Sanjay, to get the approval of the journal, to get it indexed was such a difficult task. I have no time to say today. Purvi, give us more time. We need more time. We'll call others and we'll make it a fantastic meeting. But to end it all, I'll say it has been a great evening, a great Upanishad, a great meeting. Thank you, Sanjay, for getting all of us together.
Thanks is due from our side. Thanks from my side. It has been such a great opportunity being with the three most important teachers of our country. Dr. Vinod Kumar sir, thank you. Dr. A.K. Das sir, shukriya. Dr. Chandalia sir, dhanyavad. A quiz question for Amit Gupta before I leave. We said thank you, we said shukriya, we said dhanyavad. But what about Haryanvi? What's thank you in Haryanvi? And देखो Amit भाग गया
Yeah.
because he couldn't answer the question. So maybe
Yeah, you will
Purvi
have to
can give the vote of
excuse
thanks in
me.
Hindi and English, and Dr. Das sir will be able to answer the Haryanvi question. So Purvi, before you conclude, let's ask Dr. Das to answer the Haryanvi quiz question. What's
Yes,
thank
sir.
you in Haryanvi?
I don't know. I think it must be. I don't know what to say. Tell us, sir.
You can Google sir in any language you want. The answer doesn't exist at all. The concept doesn't exist in our state.
Oh, I see.
There's no thank you in Haryanvi.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's why Amit disappeared. There is no.
That's why Amit is
Amit will be
full-blooded
back soon.
Haryanvi. Yeah, he is full-blooded Haryanvi, whom we have exported to Uttar Pradesh. So
The thanks.
the closest we have, Dr. Vinod Kumar sir, the closest we have is Thara Bhala Ho. So with that statement, Thara Bhala Ho to
Yes.
Purvi, perhaps Purvi can
I was
take
going
charge
to
now.
try Abhar because that encompasses many other languages also. But yeah, I did not know what it meant in what it was in Haryanvi. So anyway, our myth that we knew, we know so much about insulin today was completely shattered by this illuminating discussion that we had. And to simply state that the prevalence of diabetes has increased to the present stage from the mere 1.8% is in itself enigmatically alarming. So many rare stories came up where each of your personal involvement, which brought insulin to India, pushed its development, and refined its clinical use, was shared. It won't be erroneous at all to call this the ultimate masterclass in the history of insulin discovery and its voyage in India through the decades. Yes, I think Dr. Sanjay Kalra very rightly named it the Upanishad class.
Just hang on for a minute. Don't discontinue.
Indeed, it has come a long, long way from the initial dirty insulins to today's designer insulins with equally novel and convenient patient centric delivery devices. And the development of insulins has kept up with oral drugs as well, and the newer classes of oral anti-diabetic agents that have broken our conventional management of diabetes. Importantly, you all touched upon the final key in successful use of insulin, which is patient education with correct injection technique and aspects. Deep gratitude to each of you teachers, our RSSDI patrons, Professor Vinod Kumar sir, Professor Chandalia sir, Professor A.K. Das sir, and our very senior RSSDL or DI KOL, Dr. Sanjay Kalra sir. Thank you for your continued involvement, guidance, and blessings to all of us. It has been an absolutely fascinating session. And on behalf of RSSDI Center, Dr. Banshi Sabu, Dr. Sanjay Agrawal, and the entire executive team, and of course the RSSDI social media team, I extend our warm thanks to you for sparing the time today to teach us all this lovely, lovely journey of insulin discovery. Thank you so much. Abhar.
Thank you.
And once again, we have only left with the very sweet memories of this episode, which will be further available on the RSSDI website for future use.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Purvi. Sir,
Thank you, sir.
regards to
Thank
both.
you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very
Vinod
much.
sir, Dr. Chandalia sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Purvi.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye. Bye, Purvi.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, sir.